All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to just load up a command prompt. And we'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to change directory to my downloads folder because that's where I have PowerView. And then the first command we're going to run is we're going to run PowerShell, and then we'll do EP. That stands for execution policy. You can also write it out like this, execution policy. But I just like doing EP because it's shorthand and it still works. So we're just going to say execution policy bypass. And this bypasses the execution policy. Now, something to note about execution policy is it's not for security purposes, right? The reason that execution policy exists is that it's just there to stop us from executing scripts that we don't want to do, like accidentally executing a script. So we're specifically saying, hey, just go ahead and shut that off. So we're going to bypass it here with PowerShell EP bypass. And this is pretty common. You're going to see this a lot if you utilize PowerShell. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and call our program. So we're going to do that by doing this. We're going to say dot and then dot backslash like that. And you can just start typing in PowerView.ps1, auto tab, hit enter. And now that's going to happen. Nothing's going to show or tell you, okay, it's just, hey, you've loaded it. So PowerView is an incredibly powerful tool. We can do so many things, and what we're going to do with it in this course is only going to scratch the surface. So my recommendation to you is to go and read up on it. I will put a reference down in the description below where you can find a cheat sheet, and then the rest is going to be up to you for Googling and finding out what more it can do. At the end of this course, or the AD portion of the course, I'm going to provide some additional references in terms of Active Directory security and blogs and certifications and courses that you can take. And all of those will cover PowerView in much deeper level. But these are just some of the high level things that you should know when it comes to enumerating a domain and how PowerView is powerful. So let's go ahead and look at our first command. Our first command is going to just be get net domain. And what is this going to do? This is going to get information for us about the domain. So go ahead and hit enter on that. And you can see that we have a forest and it's marvel.local. We have a domain controller here of Hydra DC marvel.local. And that's all it tells us. We have a very simple domain, but if we were in a complex domain, this would be a little bit more interesting to us just to kind of know, what's going on, where are the domain controllers? And if we want to see specifically what domain controllers are there, we can say get net domain controllers like this, or a controller, I should say, and hit enter. And then it'll tell you, hey, the domain controller is right here at 192.168.57.140. And the domain controller's name is hydra-dc.marvel.local. So it gives you information specifically about the domain controller. And some networks have multiple domain controllers. And this would provide all that information about those domain controllers. But you now know, say before you had no idea where the domain controller was in your network. You'd done some scanning, but you really weren't able to identify it. You got your exploit in on a machine. You logged in, you dumped PowerView on that machine. Now you know the domain controller. You know where to target next or where your end goal might be. So that's just two quick examples. More examples. We could say, hey, let's get the domain policy. And this will show you all the different policies in the domain. For example, we can look at the Kerberos policy, the system access, etc. So let's take a look at the system access. We can do something like this. So in parentheses, go ahead and just type in get domain policy like that, and you should be able to auto tab it. And then put a dot and just say system access like this. And then hit enter. And what is this telling us? Well, this tells us a little bit about the policy here. So we can see that the minimum password age is 1 day. The maximum password age is 42. We have lockout counts of 0, meaning it's not set. Password complexity of 1. So you can look through here and just see, what's the minimum password length? 7? Okay, so now I know that the minimum password length is 7. I'm going to go ahead and just spray 7-character passwords. Or, it should be pretty easy to crack a lot of passwords in a network where it's 7. but you should be able to spray passwords across that network that are pretty weak and probably gain access to some user accounts. So this is a very good indicator of what you're up against. And, you know, it's super nice just to have access to these different policies and what to look at. Same thing with Kerberos. You can look at the ticketing age and, you know, just see how long a Kerberos ticket lasts. And you will get more into that when we get into golden tickets, but just something to keep in mind on the Kerberos side as well. So from here, we could also look at users. One command that you can run just for the sake of showing it to you is get net user. Now this one's going to be a little dirty. Okay, so now we're here and we just dumped this big long list of all the users and it looks dirty. Like we can pull down all the users here and it's interesting. If we want to take our time and kind of read through this, you could see, okay, well, here's Frank Castle and it's Frank Castle at marvel.local. Here's his name. Here's the Sam account name right here, which is F Castle. You can kind of read through these, and maybe if you look through these, you might be able to look at the descriptions and find, you know, an interesting description here with a password in it, which we do have, like this one here, description, password is my password 123 pound. So this is another way to compromise an account by, you know, just viewing the descriptions here. We did that with the man in the middle 6, but this is just another way to do it. Now, we could do something like this. We could say, because like you see how dirty this output is with just like 7 or 8 users. Imagine a enterprise network where there's hundreds of users. That would take forever. So we could say something like select CN, and that'll just pull down all the usernames or all the users. Or we could do Sam account name instead, like Sam account name, and just pull down the account names here. If you wanted to try to get the descriptions, we could do description. And you could see the passwords of my password 123. We'd be like, where did that belong? So quick, dirty way just to kind of sort through these users and find out a little bit of information about them. And we could look at certain things on here too, like when was their last user login? How many bad password counts do they have? What is their user account control or their RID number, which 500 would be the admin, right? And we just can go through all this information and kind of look through it and pick apart anything that might be of interest to us. And we'll talk about some of these features here in just a second and why they might be interesting. So let's talk about and shift actually on this to user properties. So we could say get user property, and this is going to show you all the properties that a user might have. And we just covered all of these. These are exactly what's through and through on these user accounts, right? But let's say, for example, go ahead and just tab up. Let's just say we want to get the properties of the password last set. Okay, we can look at the different users and when their password was last set. And that might be useful. We can know, okay, there's an old stale password out in the network, or these password accounts are new. Like you see the administrator password was the last one changed on 11/30, and then the newer users from the man in the middle attack was on 12/9. And you can kind of just look through this. Same thing, like you could look at, for example, logon count. And this is a good way to actually identify honeypot accounts. So you want to be able to see how many times this user has logged in. And if you see an account that has never logged in before, that might be a honeypot account. You might not want to try to attack that account. You might want to avoid that completely because they might just be letting that sit there for you to capture. And then once you capture it, it's going to alert their system. So think about that as well. These properties can be incredibly useful. You could also look at like the bad password count and just see who's been entering in bad passwords. And if there's one there that has like hundreds of them, you know, you could see that if it's maybe been under attack, if you're an administrator, for example. So there's all kinds of useful information. I recommend that you just kind of play through this as well and see, you know, go back and look at some of these in here and just say, okay, how can I sort through this and what might be interesting to me? Again, reading the reference guides that I put in the references are going to be super important as well. So from here, let's talk about computers. Just like getting the users, we can also get the computers in the domain. So we can just say get net computer like this. You can be able to auto tab, I screwed up, computer, and hit enter. And okay, it'll it'll list out here all the computers in the domain. We only have 3, which is useful. If this were a bigger domain, be much more. Now, that's not a lot of information there. So if we want more information, we could say full data like this. Hit enter. And then we get probably too much information. But we can come through here and look at it like, here's Spider-Man's machine. You could see the last bad password time. You could see a logon count. You could see a lot of information here, like what's the operating system. And you can start to identify operating systems if you want, or you could just sort these out. Like, for example, if you tab up, you could just say select operating system and sort. So select is just like grep, right? You're just pulling down specific information. So select operating system, and then you could see, okay, well, I've got 1 Server 2019 and 2 Windows 10 machines in here. So that way you could start picking and pulling apart what are the servers in the domain and what are the Windows 10 machines, or what are the user machines, and kind of start separating them out and getting that information. So from here, we can also look at groups. So for example, we could say get net group, which is going to output quite a bit. And these are all built-in groups. We haven't made anything new. But we could look through here and see if there's any interesting groups for us. Because we haven't done anything new, it's really not going to be interesting. But we can sort through this and say, what about get net group by group name? And we just say domain admins. Okay, and then we'll pull down any of the domain admins this way. Or we can actually sort too by just a wildcard. Instead of specifying all the admins here, what if we just say, or just domain admins, what if we say we want to know specifically what admins are out there? So there's administrators, Hyper-V administrators, enterprise, domain, key admins. So you can look for all the admin group names as well. And we can get the members of these groups if we want. So we can say get net group member. And then we're just going to go ahead and say group name, and we can pick one of these groups. We could just say domain admins again. So this will list out all of our domain admins. So we know that SQL Service, T-Stark, and Administrator are all domain admins in our network. So useful information to have here as well. So a couple more things I want to point out. There is a tool in here called Invoke Share Finder. This is a nice one because you can look and find all the SMB shares in the network. You can see what files are being shared and where they're being shared. So we know about admin C, IPC on every machine, but what about this share here that we have? And then HackMe came up, right? So it's good to look through these shares and see if there's anything of interest and identify potential interesting shares for us. And then 2 more I want to show you. Well, really 1 more in 2 different ways. So let's look at this. We're going to type in get net GPO. So this is going to show us all the group policies. Now I added a special one in here just to show you that we can pull down a bunch of them. But so look, it's going to look interesting. It's going to pull down that heavy data again. And sometimes it's overwhelming, but we can see like disable Windows Defender. That's one we added in there, right? And then I added in disable SMB signing, even though we didn't have to do that. I just added that one in to show you a few more in here. So let's say we want to select something out of here. I like to do this. I like to select display name. And I also like to select when changed. And that'll show us, okay, here's the display name. So it gives us an idea of what's going on. So we know that there's default domain policies, and then we've got to disable Windows Defender, disable SMB signing. So we know that that's going on in the network. And we can learn about their policies that are going on and just collect more information. And then we can learn when these were changed in the network, right? So it's important to just dig in and get as much information as possible. Now, this may have been overwhelming. This may have been a lot, and it may have went really quick. My advice is probably to go back and watch this 1 more time, play around with this, or just look at your notes, play around in here, and take good notes on what you did. And you can go to the references and pull down more information and see how you can utilize that in the future. I think this is one of the greatest tools you can use for enumeration. So once we're on a machine, we want to enumerate the network. This is a great way to do so. And you can see how quick we can get information about the domain policies, users, user properties, computers, groups, group policy. And it can do so much more than what I showed you, but this is a really good baseline for you to understand and know about. So that is it for PowerView. From here, we're going to go ahead and move on to a tool called Bloodhound, which is incredibly fun to use, and you're going to see how beneficial it can be. So we'll have a high-level overview of Bloodhound, and then we'll move on into our next section.